Legacy. Legacies are like the rings of a tree, those little circles that repeat over and ripple outward. They are forged by fire and flood. They remind me of ancestry, each one building on the next. These circles, depending on the roots, can form something strong and proud, or if not cared for, something decayed and broken. My grandma got married at 15, had her first kid at 16, and was beaten almost daily. Her house was filthy, and men were always around. She was a broken child raising broken children. Her legacy to me was that the actions or inactions of others can carry on for generations. My mother never stood a chance. She was 3 years old when she got German measles, which left her mentally disabled. When she was in middle school, she was hit by a car and in a coma for a few weeks. She came out of it, but she never went back to school. She grew up to be an illiterate woman who would be abused and discarded by the men in her life. She had no one to teach her how to be better to her children than her mother was to her. My mom had me on her 21st birthday. I was born 4 months early, and I weighed only 4 pounds. For the first few years of my life, we lived all over the Bay Area. In the closet of someone's house, in the back of a bar, or on people's floors. When I was around 4 or 5, my mom took up with a guy, and he abused me. This was the beginning of a cycle that would repeat throughout my childhood. It went like this. My mom would bring home a man. He would hurt me. Someone would call Child Protective Services. Sometimes we'd move away to avoid CPS. Sometimes I'd be taken away and then eventually be returned to my mom. But there was always a guy in the picture. Never in a good way. Always in a terrible way. At one point, I was placed with a foster parent, Pam. My experience in foster care can be summed up in a story. One evening, Pam put a burrito on my plate. I could only eat half of it, and she forced me to eat more. I threw up on the plate, and she still made me eat it. In the 8th grade, I was taken away and sent to live with my cousin Tina in Oakland. She gave me structure. I riled against it, but I desperately needed it. My grades eventually shot up, and I made friends for the first time. I was reunited with my mom around 15, 16. I was able to help navigate getting transitional housing through Life Moves, a tipping point grantee. I made sure we were never homeless again. 1 minute. Thank you. But even though we had a roof over our heads, my mom wasn't able to hold down a job. I made the heartbreaking choice to leave high school and work full-time. First at a pizza place, and then at Baskin-Robbins to pay the rent and to keep the lights on. I resigned myself to the fact that I would be working low-wage jobs for the rest of my life. But I wanted more. I knew I could do more. So on top of working full-time, I enrolled at SF City College, I got my GED, and I made it to San Francisco State. SF State is where I met my beloved Xochitl from Guardian Scholars, another tipping point grantee. She lined up academic support, therapy, and in my senior year, a life-changing internship with J-Bay. In all my life, I have never met so many brilliant, talented, and soul-deep beautiful women as the team that I encountered at J-Bay. After my internship, they hired me on as their administrative assistant. So, One day, Amy calls me into her office, and she offered me the chance to become their operations manager. I thought she was crazy. Amy, I really thought you were crazy. But your belief in me changed my life. In that role, I wrote the employee handbook, I set up the healthcare coverage, and I helped J-Bay transition from being a fiscally sponsored organization to being an independent organization. My favorite, oh, thank you. My favorite moments at J-Bay were when a legislative session would end. Our whole team would gather around and we'd begin dreaming of what was possible for the next year. Ideas would start flying. Some of these ideas would become laws that would transform the lives of thousands of people like me. Leaving J-Bay after 5 years to work at Tipping Point was the hardest thing I've done as an adult. I came to Tipping Point because I wanted to help people like my mother and my grandmother, people who'd fallen through the cracks into poverty, abuse, and homelessness. When I came to Tipping Point, I was terrified because you don't come to Tipping Point with just good intentions and gumption. But my time at J-Bay gave me the confidence and a sense of purpose to know I could do the work. My goal now is to learn everything necessary to run my own nonprofit one day. An organization, thank you. I want to run an organization that makes sure that every woman has a Tina or a Xochitl or an Amy. Experience has taught me that I am the collection of so many legacies. My mother's legacy is one of fiercest survival. Tina's legacy is the power that safety can have on the soul. Tipping Point and J-Bay's legacy is the knowledge that resilience is worth more than just survival. I don't take my legacy for granted. I made different choices because I had the ability to make those choices. I have opportunity that women for generations before me never had. But opportunity is not a given. It is the work of good people. Like every one of you in this room here today. This is what it takes.